Third is Suarez. Goodell comes running in. He's under it, makes the catch. Here's the throw to the plate. It's in the air. He is out! Cameron Rick hangs on! Oh, man, what a play! Deep to right field. Way up there, and way second
Well. I think when we were planning on doing an episode about 4 days ago and we had to cancel, the mood was going to be quite different than this one. But we're here because the Phillies acquired Jesus Luzardo from the Marlins on Sunday morning in a trade which centered around Sterling Caba, the 18-year-old shortstop prospect, and Boyd was also in there, who he's pretty much Roman Quinn 2.0. A lot of stolen bases, a lot of defense, like no bat. You're not going to miss that. Obviously, Caba, a notable prospect, but I just don't know. I know he's so young, but Trey Turner is here for 9 more seasons. Bryson Stott, unless what happened in 2024 becomes the norm, is going to be here a while. And there's a chance that Adam Miller sticks in the middle of the infield. So Caba didn't totally make sense to stick around, but he's the centerpiece of this trade, which I think it's nice that they were able to acquire someone notable without giving up any of the big boys, because as we'll talk about, Garrett Crochet went to the Red Sox would have cost at least 2 of those guys.
Yeah, I think, like you said, we were planning to record earlier in the week. It definitely would have had a different feel to it. Yeah. And, we missed, Luzardo trade is obviously the big thing we want to talk about. We did kind of miss the Max Kepler signing. And I think, overall, the biggest frustration with this offseason is that they talk such a big game, but then, as moves started, obviously, they weren't really in on Soto, but then they tried to. Then we weren't. The plan wasn't matching what their talk was, and then they were like, "We're not internally trying to trade Bohm," but then every report came out that every trade that was made, Bohm was offered when they were trying to dip their toes into it. But realistically, it seemed like they had. They wanted Gilbert. As of a week ago, it seemed like this offseason was kind of dead to rights just because they had no concept of what value was across Major League Baseball. But, I love the package they were able to get Luzardo for. Obviously, Caba's kind of a defense-first guy. They've made the comparison that, as he's been coming up, a lot of scouts have said, "Oh, Francisco Lindor." But I really would be shocked if the bat ever gets even remotely close to Lindor. Even if he hits, Caba has no power, and Lindor is obviously kind of, he's an elite hitter, but he mashes. So, I'm not too worried about giving the Marlins a hitter to develop. We've seen that hasn't gone particularly well for them in the past. And Amari and Boyd really is just a throw in here. I don't think the Phillies ever really saw him contributing anything for them. Like you said, he's a Roman Quinn type build. So realistically, you're getting a guy who was, top 10 in the Cy Young in 2023. He was hurt a lot last year. For a prospect that was blocked here for years to mentioned, Aiden Miller says he wants to stay at shortstop. Happens or not, if you look at what the package that the Red Sox gave up to get Garrett Crochet, who has no team control left after this year, has just as much of an injury history as Luzardo does. he's going to cost a lot more. Like they're getting 2 years of Luzardo for like 17 or 18, as opposed to 1 year of Crochet paying 4 top 100 prospects or whatever the Red Sox paid, and then having to give him probably north of 150 to 200 million dollars in a contract extension because he's so young. Like if you're just comparing that and betting on the upside of Luzardo, like I think comparing the two prices, this was a no-brainer of a trade.
Yeah, I mean, just in the realm of obviously what they want to do, they don't want to really move Painter or Miller, although Matt Gill kind of came out and said that at the deadline last year, they did offer both Miller and Crawford in a Crochet package. And the belief was that from the Phillies side, that the White Sox said, once you put Miller in the package, we would accept it. And apparently they still went back on that. So, that happened. But I just think kind of in terms of outside of that's like an ultra aggressive Phillies offer. Like you just don't see an offer like that from them. And now we're kind of back to the norm. And, this is a trade they do. And obviously the Real Muto trade with the Marlins the last time these two teams got together for a big trade was one of the most lopsided trades in MLB history in terms of war of what each side got back. So I think the Phillies obviously dealing with the Marlins. So, they're not a wise organization. So I think, that helps. And, you mentioned 2023, the Cy Young voting. The Phillies, the theme of this offseason seems to be forget 2024, look at the baseball card, because the three guys they've brought in, Luzardo, Jordan Romano as a closer, a bullpen guy, and Max Kepler to play left field. All three of those guys had really bad or injury riddled 2024s, but in 2023, I think two of them were all-stars, and Kepler was a 24 home run guy. So, if you get, back to the 2023 level of these three guys, you are a totally different team. But if 2024 was just the start of what these three guys are, you're in a little bit of trouble there. And I do think quick on Luzardo, the two teams he's played for, the A's and the Marlins, probably two of the 3 or 4 worst organizations you could be a part of. I think there's a lot more in the tank with him that those dumb organizations just couldn't get out. And I think, Caleb Cotham, the Phillies, can maybe get another level out of him.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And one of the things that I'm most excited about with Luzardo is, point one, we don't have to watch Taijuan Walker pitch anymore. If you're just looking at, the 5 best starters that we have, Wheeler, Nola, Luzardo, Sanchez, Ranger. There's 5. And then the second thing is Andrew Painter's going to work his way in there. Now, obviously, Paul Skeens is a generational talent. But, 2 years ago, before he was drafted, Painter was, ranked the same place that Skeens was prospect. And then Skeens overtook him, probably rightfully so. He's obviously probably the favorite to win the Cy this year. But as far as like prospect pedigree goes, Painter is just as high as Skeens. Coming off of not pitching at, obviously he was in the fall league this year and the numbers looked pretty good, but not really having that major league routine in a year and a half. He's going to be on an innings limit, and they're going to have to monitor how many bullets he's able to use early in the season so that he's healthy when come the back half of the season when you want him, throwing and available to you in October. Luzardo being there, even if you want to go with Walker, you could still have a 6-man rotation, whether it's Painter or Walker as the 6th, and ease Painter up to speed and get him comfortable pitching, pick his spots. If you skip, 2 starts in between and save his innings for the playoffs, when you could even use him as a bullpen asset. If you're like, hey, go throw 1 inning in the bullpen in the playoffs, it gives you that option where you're not really losing it with a 6-man rotation. Whereas in the past, it's like we've had these fill-in guys be like Matt Moore, Chase Anderson, or all these guys. Like when Luzardo's healthy, he is a top 5 lefty in the game. We saw that in 2023. He started game 1 of the wild card against us in that series against the Marlins. Like, he has elite, Cy Young stuff when he's right, and I trust Caleb Cotham to be able to get him back to that 2023 level, if not higher. And it gives you some flexibility as to how you want to approach Andrew Painter. Like, now there's really no pressure on him to break camp and be in the. It's like, hey, give us good innings. We'll send you down to AAA. We'll probably, be careful. Maybe 3 inning starts in AAA just to get you back facing upper echelon hitters. Obviously, AAA hitters are a little bit different than major league hitters. We've seen that with the bench guys that we tend to bring up, but it just allows you to kind of take the pressure off of Painter to replace Colin Walker, because you have a very good replacement for him already at the major league level.
Yeah, so that brings up a couple things too. Obviously, Ranger Suarez is a free agent after the season. I don't think they'll trade him now, but like Taiwan Walker has to be cut, right? Like, there's no shot he's here when spring training not opens. There's a chance I think they give him an opportunity to play his way onto the roster, maybe as the long man, or do enough that some team wants to take a shot on him in a trade. But there's no shot he's on the opening day roster, I think, at this point. I don't know how they get rid of him. I do not know, but I don't see how you could have those 6 there and then also Painter. Now, I know they got pretty lucky the last couple seasons with starter health for the most part, but that could change this year, and I think just having the most guys as possible would be nice, but Taiwan's just unplayable. So Painter is your 6th in AAA, I think would be pretty nice, and I think it gives you in the playoffs. Obviously, we could talk about the fact that they just have to hit, but if you can put in the DS where maybe you only need 3 starters, and you could put Luzardo and Painter in the bullpen, that's a lot of added assets.
If you're talking like a wild card or an NLDS series, you have 5 legitimate guys that you'd be comfortable with. Not even including Painter. If you're just talking the 5 that would start the season today, you have guys that could, if they started game 1 of a series, maybe game 1 with Ranger is a little bit of a stretch, but we've seen them do it against the Braves in an NLDS when coming off of a wild card series. If you're starting any of those 5 guys in the first game of the series, I feel like you feel pretty good about. It's not a situation where, wow, we didn't have a chance to set up our rotation. That is, opening day starter level stuff out of all 5 of those guys.
Yeah.
It gives them some wiggle room as far as how they want to arrange things. Obviously, October is a ways away. I'm not going to jump to that because after last year, they've kind of lost my trust after they played 500 from June 1st on. But as far as the pitching goes, I feel like it gives us a pretty good reason to be excited about how they can mix and match things. And the fact that he's a lefty, with Soto now being in the division again, and the Otanis and the Freemans and the Matt Olsons of the world, all of those guys. And basically, when you're thinking of the end goal and you see, okay, we're going to have to go through the Dodgers. Now we're going to have to go through the Mets again. Braves, all of these teams, they have these lefties that are just there in the middle of the lineup. And you have in a playoff series now, like you said, we can move one of them to the bullpen. So it's not just, hey, Alvarado and Strom, who have shown tendency to be a little bit shaky. You have more lefty options there to get those middle of the order guys out when you're in a tight series or a playoff race in August or September.
Yeah, and the Dodgers won the World Series kind of piecemealing the bullpen together by just having so many options. And I think, maybe the Phillies are trying to do that via rotation because they have a lot better, they have a lot more good options in their rotation than they do their bullpen right now, which is funny. But like, I think if you think Painter bounces back, they have 6 guys in the rotation we really like, and maybe they have 3 guys in the bullpen we like right now. So I think that certainly helps. But yeah, I'm just interested to see what they do with the bullpen now. Like, I know we talked about they don't want to go over that third tax threshold, and they're like $5 million away from it. They brought in Romano, but they didn't do anything else with the bullpen. I don't know. I feel like they need another guy in the bullpen, but I just don't know if their idea now is let's just load up the rotation, and if we have to, we throw someone back there to fix issues until the deadline. I just don't know where the thought process goes with the bullpen, but I just feel like I think they're just trying to hide up the bullpen by loading the rotation.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I hate the bullpen. I hate where they're at. I like if he's healthy. I think Romano can be very good. Obviously, we've seen the numbers from the last 3 full seasons that he's pitched, but I don't know. I hate losing a guy like Jeff Hoffman, and I mean he's not technically gone yet, but after they made the Kepler trade, they kind of said that they were done with impact signings. Obviously, this Luzardo trade kind of counteracts that point in getting impact guys. So I'm not going to close the door on the bullpen being done yet, but if they started the season today, I would feel particularly great about where the bullpen is at. Like, I get Estevez wasn't great for us. He got some saves, but it seemed like he gave up a lot of hard contact. But he's been a proven closer for the last 2.5, 3 years of, full seasons. And then you're losing a guy who was an all-star last year in Hoffman. Like, that's a lot of production to lose from the bullpen. And who knows what Alvarado's going to be. Strom has been very good the last 2 years, but to me, obviously he has an interesting quirk with how his stride and arm angle kind of act to make the ball get on hitters a little bit faster. But if you're just looking at how back end stuff across baseball today, whether it's, Clase or Johan Duran or the Diaz brothers, Camilo Duvall, like Strom doesn't pop as that prototypical back end of the bullpen stuff. Like the fastball's 93 or 94 to get up to 95. The slider is very good, but like it's hittable. So I like the Hoffman guy or even Estevez can get it up to 100. Somebody who's back there to throw smoke. Romano's not that anymore, I don't think. But yeah, I'd like him to get either Hoffman or Tanner Scott, but those guys are probably out of their price range at this point, it seems.
Yeah, I think it's gonna have to be like a low end move, like for a middle reliever. I know. Let's talk about Bohm, I guess, to finish this off. But the Mariners won't even give us Brash, who is like their 8th inning guy for Bohm, which is pretty bad. But I think like someone like that to kind of round out the bullpen would be nice. But at this point, because in my opinion, the upgrade in the outfield is not significant enough, I don't even think you can move Bohm at this point. And because it doesn't sound like they're going to sign Bregman. They don't want to go over that tax, and Bregman will take you very much over that tax. So I think Bohm is staying. I think the lineup is complete, and Kepler apparently is the everyday left fielder, and he's another lefty, which I don't understand. And Brandon Marsh is like more the full-time center fielder, and I think part of that is I think you could justify Marsh's not so great offense in center field versus left field, but I also think you're putting a lot of eggs in a Kepler bounce back. So I don't know. I really like the rotation. I think the lineup, obviously, Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, and Kyle Schwarber can carry the majority of the load, but I just don't think the pieces around them, the role players, are necessarily where they need to be. I think there was some better, I know maybe more expensive options, but some teams you could have traded with to get some of these higher on base percentage guys and stuff, higher contact guys, and I don't think they did that. And I would have moved Marsh instead of Bohm, to be honest with you. But I just don't see really what the plan is with the lineup because it's exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it when we were discussing how our perfect off seasons were going to look. If you look at across baseball at the third base position, yeah, you'd like more power out of a like that, but the upgrades over what Bohm gives you on what his contract currently is, like, they're not really there. It's Bregman seems to kind of be at like 6 years at least. So
Yeah.
I don't love doing that deal with how the regression's kind of gone, especially even though our stadium's very hitter friendly. Like taking him away from the Crawford boxes in Houston, where he's already regressed a bit, I don't particularly love. So I'm fine staying away from that. Yeah, I too probably would have looked to move off of Marsh. I think he has one more year of team control than Bohm, so like that might be a more appealing piece to teams in trade. But I saw earlier in the offseason that the best deal that the Phillies could have gotten for Bohm was what the Reds did with Jonathan India, the Brady Singer for Jonathan India straight up. The Royals were willing to do that with Bohm, which I'm fine not doing. Like there is like okay, but I'd rather not trade a middle of the order bat in this lineup for like a fourth starter. So yeah, I think the offense is probably set just because at this point in time, I don't, if you're not planning to go over the luxury tax, there's no real, not even upgrades, there's no real like players out there for you on offense that are going to be more than like a filler or just to say we made a transaction. So at that point, like one thing, I think that Sean tweeted this after the Luzardo trade this morning. You managed to get through an off season, assuming that the big moves are done for us. You managed to get through an off season without trading the top 3 prospects in your system and even kind of hanging on to Abel. So like we said this last year, Middleton said it last year. You still have pretty much all of your big assets to get something done at the deadline if you see fit. They were willing to offer Miller for Crochet last year. I know we'll see. It seems like a lot of the talk is that Miller might make a push for a roster spot later in the season. If not, you'll have a half a season to evaluate him and Crawford in Double-A and kind of see where they're at, if they're going to be real players for your team next season. And for some reason, like Marsh actually stopped striking out 36% of the time and actually can put together more than 1 month of the season, you might be more flexible to say, hey, we'll move Crawford for an impact bat.
Right.
I don't know who that would be, but you have a lot of flexibility at the trade deadline to do things now, not so much financially, but you manage to hold on to all of the assets that teams would really find appealing. So it gives you more months to evaluate them, and it gives you some room to, they had a really bad few months last year, but for the first 3 months, 2.5, 3 months, the offense was really good. So I think, like you said, a lot of this offseason was betting on 2023 and kind of getting 2024. I don't think that's just like specific to the new signings they have. I think that is also applicable to the lineup, and forget the last half of 2024 and what June through October looked like. And, there were 2 months last year where Harper didn't have a home run, pretty much. So like expecting the offense to bounce back. I know it's kind of like Groundhog's Day saying this all over again, but I don't think it's that far-fetched to have expectations that the offense has a better season than they did last year.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I see that. And I mentioned Stott earlier. I don't know if Stott will be as bad as last year went. What if Castellanos kind of is what he was the last 3 months of the season, the whole season, that's big too. So I think there is more room for growth with these guys, even though, they are an aging group. I think Real Muto not playing as much might help him offensively too if Marchand becomes, a decent backup, because it sounds like he honestly might make the team over Stubbs because Stubbs has an option left and Marchand does not. But either way, like just playing him less might help. They are kind of, there is no other move to make with the offense at this point because you gave Max Kepler $10 million. So I know no one even wants to really entertain this, but you can't sign Pete Alonso and move Bryce Harper to the outfield because you're not giving Max Kepler $10 million to play once a week as a bench bat. So like there's no move left to make here outside of if you traded Boehm and signed Bregman, which I don't think they'll do. There's no move left. There's no center fielder, a righty. They really need a righty is the other thing. There's too many lefties in this lineup, and bringing Kepler's another one because now you're making Marsh more of the everyday left or center fielder, and he's a lefty. So now you have Schwarber, Harper, Stott, Marsh, and Kepler, 5 everyday lefties. I just think that's too much. And Marchand, who is switch on days Real Muto doesn't play. So, and Stubbs is a lefty if he does make the team. So there's too many lefties, I think, too many lefty bats here in the equation the way it is. So if they have to make another move at the deadline or something, I think it's got to be a righty. But who at this point, I don't know. Like if the Kyle Tucker and the Cubs experience doesn't work out and they're like 20 games under 500 at the deadline, could they try to get something back for him? I don't know. He's another lefty. So unless maybe you put Marsh in the deal, we don't have a center fielder unless it's Rojas. And then there's too many confusing things. There's not enough space is what I'm trying to say. There's not enough room. So there's really no upgrades to be made to the offense because you are more or less stuck with the majority of these guys. So Boehm was really the only piece that was in a sense movable, and his value isn't near what they thought he was. So they're better off to hold on to him. I just feel like getting rid of Marsh would have been the better move, but you're kind of stuck with everyone at this point.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I'm like, the news came out maybe a couple weeks ago that Stott had a shoulder injury for the entirety of the season or banged up. So, hopefully that kind of, you can point to that and say this is why he was not particularly great last year at the plate. So hopefully he bounces back. I needs to have a good year. I think we're looking for all these righty upgrades when basically you have a $300 million shortstop who, yes, season last year and on pace to, lead shortstops in WAR until he got hurt. And then he came back. The chase rate for Turner and the strikeout rate's just entirely too high. So it's tough because a lot of the things that we're harping on for this lineup, they're all veterans at this point. So it's tough to say, hey, change the way you approach to 30-year-olds or 1-year-olds. But realistically, that's what has to happen. Like they have to stop chasing. And if they do, you won't really need protection because you have it. Like if Castellanos and Turner get back to the back of the baseball cards, then you have your 2 righty impact bats in the middle of the lineup. And, Boehm's a good complementary righty. And Real Muto not playing every day should help. The extension talk there scares me a little bit with Real Muto, but like if Trey Turner seen him perform other teams and we've seen spurts of, then you won't have to worry about where the righty upgrade is going to come from because you have it already.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've said it the last 2 postseasons. We've said it before the last 3 off seasons. But at some point, slap a Band-Aid with a $800 million contract in the case of Juan Soto and say, this will fix the offense. At some point, the $1 billion that you already have invested to it has to show up. And, you know, you can't just trade everybody away and expect to you need guys you're already paying to perform. And, you know, hopefully they've seen their own flaws the last 2 years, especially the last 2 postseasons. And like the biggest sticking point should be watching how we approached at bats against the Mets, and then watching the next week how the Dodgers approached at bats against the Mets. And, you know, the light bulb should click right there. Wow, if we just walked up there with no bat, we'd walk 65 times and score a million runs in 6 games. Like, it obviously at that point in time in the season, the Mets were that much better, but the lineup was just trying to do way too much. And if they get back to a more simplistic approach, I think that they will be just fine. And, you know, not getting the Kyle Tucker or the Juan Soto thing, it won't be that big of a point because the lineup starts to perform like they're supposed to.
Yeah. No, I agree. So I think that's pretty much all that's left that's realistic this offseason is maybe another righty bullpen arm. Outside of that, I don't see anything else really happening. So, you know, we'll obviously come back some point in the middle of January and talk about that stuff if they do get someone else or if they don't, kind of what the plan is. But yeah, it's, I don't know, banking on rebounds, I guess, pretty much is how this offseason's going. So we will see how that goes. So we'll be back in January whenever something happens.